well. But let's take this across to Nayantara Rai because we've got breaking news on our screens right now. And that news is telling us that the Tata Group and Interglobe also have not submitted expressions of interest for Air India. Remember, it looks like there is going to be absolute cold shoulder for India's national carrier out for sale. The government wants to sell about 76% stake, wants to retain 24%, but looks like the bid conditions, the conditions that have been laid out for the sale is not agreeable to any operator. I don't know if this is a tactic in which they're all colluding so that the government can change norms, but the story on your screens right now, and we're the only ones telling you this at this stage, is that the Tata Group and Interglobe, which operates the Indigo airline, have not submitted expressions of interest. These are not bids. I want my desk to make this correction. These are not bids. These are expressions of interest. Let me take this across to Nayantara Rai. Nayantara, what exactly are you picking up? Because we were given to understand that they will get into the game just because they would want to keep themselves interested and they would want to keep themselves aware of what's happening.
That's absolutely right, but it seems there's a cold shoulder coming in from the biggies when it comes to submitting an expression of interest for Air India. The process was you submit an expression of interest which is not binding. It allows you then to be part of the war room to get access to financial data and then submit a binding financial bid for the national carrier. But guess what? It seems at least two biggies, Interglobe, which owns Indigo, as well as the Tatas, which have a joint venture with Singapore Airlines that were considered to be in the fray for Air India, have decided to skip this. They've decided to not even to even submit an expression of interest. What I can also tell you is that I've spoken to senior people in the government. Till today morning, they were certainly expecting expression of interest stage to be a successful one. You had the Civil Aviation Secretary yesterday telling reporters that while no bids had been submitted, bids would be submitted at the last hour. I've now spoken to senior executives at both these groups, whether it's Interglobe as well as the House of Tatas, and confirmation coming in that they've decided to skip the bidding stage. Now, I don't have certainty for certain right now that Jet Airways has not submitted a bid either. Jet was expected to tie up with Delta, KLM and Virgin and submit an expression for interest. I'm not able to confirm that, but for right now, we don't have any information to believe that they have either. So is this a strategy where everyone has decided, let's even skip the expression of interest stage, which could force the hand of the government to rework the bid documents the way the private companies have been seeking? They've been unhappy with a whole host of terms and conditions, whether it's to do with the debt that has to be taken forward, the working capital, as well as the board seats. So Supriya, this is the breaking news, the exclusive story that we're picking up. Is it the Air India privatization off to a damp squib? You've already seen the expression of interest stage being extended once. Second time round, no success, it seems.
No success at all. Yes, the expression of interest deadline was extended. But, you know, just for the benefit of our viewers, it's important to highlight why there is absolute damn squib. Air India has losses that have accrued to about 50,000 crore rupees. It's got debt to a similar tune. The government wants to sell Air India lock, stock, barrel. So it includes the domestic and the international airline. It includes Air India Express. It includes, it includes every part of the business right now, which is what people don't want to buy. People want to invest and want to buy in smaller parts, in smaller parcels. People want MRO, people want engineering infrastructure, because those are absolute assets of Air India. That is not happening. And then I think the biggest concern is the government's intention to retain that 24% stake, because that has ensured that no private operator will have the maneuver, because 24% stake will mean 2 board seats, and no private operator wants to operate with the government sitting on board, because you will always be constricted, especially in a sector like aviation. Are these the conditions that you're picking up, Nayantara? And is this, my sense is that I don't think Jet is going to put in a bid either, because I think this is going to be a concerted effort, some kind of collaborative competition there, because people will perhaps want the government to review these norms. A lot of people that we speak in the government also, Nayantara, do turn around and tell us, you know what, these will have to be changed, but this has to be done by the GOM eventually. And I remember asking this question to Suresh Prabhu, the aviation minister, that if you get no expressions of interest, will you change it? And he said, it's the group of ministers that will take a final call. I've got Dheeraj Mathur from PwC. Nayantara, just stay with us for now. Dheeraj Mathur, are you surprised? And we've got confirmation from 2 operators right now. We don't have confirmation from Jet. But common sense tells me that Jet is not going to put in an expression of interest either. The fact that Interglobe, which operates the Indigo Airlines, and the Tata Group have not put the expression of interest. Does this come to you as a surprise?
Well, actually, I think they have indicated that they would not be doing so maybe a couple of weeks back. So I think it was there in the press. So, no, not really, because they had said that they don't have the either interest or appetite for it.
Yeah, they had said so, but people say a lot of positioning and then they go back to it. Okay, Nayantara, you have some more information that you have right now?
I actually wanted to contest what Mr. Mathur has said, because I think it was 10 days ago when Naresh Goyal in Europe had actually said he's not closed the door on Air India. So actually he confused the press, Dheeraj, and I would like to contest you on that. He was on record for that. While we dial maybe other experts, Dheeraj, my question to you was, and we pretty much now have confirmation that Jet has not bid either. What can the government do? Do you think it's also a case where the private carriers have gotten together and they're forcing the hand of the government to change the terms which are more favorable towards them?
Well, first, just a quick clarification. I think I responded to a question about Tata's in the Globe, not about Jet. So that was what I said. As far as what, I don't know if this is a case of collusion. I doubt it. I don't think so. I mean, if you look at the different operators, they all have different expertise and strengths. Interglobe is essentially a low-cost carrier. It's not a full-service provider. And therefore, so I don't know if it's fair to say that there is collusion. I think each is struggling or has their own objectives and their own priorities.
Yeah, they have their own priorities, because I think the priority of the government is to sell Air India. It is not a sustainable operation. I think putting these stiff conditions I think the ministers who've been in charge of this have to be blamed, because you've put stiff conditions, you want to stay invested, and no private operator would want you on board. That's the reality of how businesses are done. You do not want the government sitting and breathing down your neck with a 24% stake, 2 board seats, and asking you to do or what not to do, because there will be layoffs. You know, and the government has no business telling people that you will have to hold these people back, you will have to retain staff for 1 year. That's not how private sector operates, and I doubt it very much that you know, this is going to carry on like this. I think the government will have to change the norms if it is at all serious about bidding. But we also know that the RSS, the ideologue of the government, the Swadeshi Jagran Manch, they're all opposed to Air India sale in this present form. They want the Swadeshi operators. The question is, where are the Swadeshi operators right now? I think I will have to wrap this up here, because the GDP data for fiscal year 18 is going to be out any moment, and we will go around to addressing that story. Dheeraj Mathur and Nayantara, thank you very much for joining us. Do we take a breather and go to GDP, or do we start coverage right away? If my director can please tell me, because this is an important piece of information. Okay, let's start. Good to be back with you, and this is a story that you first heard right here on ET Now. Before we went to the GDP coverage, no expressions of interest for the national carrier, and it looks like the Air India stake sale plan goes back to square one. Nayantara Rai and Ruchi Bhatia are both joining us. Nayantara, congratulations on getting that story first. But what has gone wrong? Neither Jet nor Indigo, no Tata Group, no one's interested in the Maharaja?
Well, it certainly seems like that. The deadline to submit an expression of interest expired at 5 p.m. today. And what I can tell you is the government didn't think it was going to draw such a blank. It did think that, you know, parties would at least enter the expression of interest stage, because they would have nothing to lose. Even if you submit an expression of interest, it's not a binding offer. It just allows you to enter into further negotiations and actually get access to financial data, be part of the financial due diligence process. So it was quite convinced that, in fact, it was going to get a pretty good, healthy response. And that's what a lot of aviation experts also believe. For example, we had Kapil Kaul of Kappa on the channel saying that I think the government will be surprised it's going to receive so many expressions of interest. But it seems it's drawn a blank. I can tell you that, we broke the story right here in ET now first, from an Interglobe to a Tata to a Jet, who've all been in the fray at some time or the other, saying they're not interested. Each of the ones that I spoke to had different reasons for that, whether it was high debt or it didn't fit into the entire scheme of things. But Supriya, I would like to leave it with this thought. Look at the national carrier. Look at the kind of bilateral rights it has, the number of planes it has, the parking rights it has. Of course, it's an asset, but it has a huge liability. Did the government get it wrong with what it was trying to do with the debt? Did the government get it wrong with wanting to keep two board seats? Or is this also a case maybe where private carriers feel they're going to force the government's hand and make sure that they get the terms and conditions of their choice?
There could be some amount of collusion. There is no denying that. There could be some amount of collaboration on the part of the private operators, but I don't know what is the government's thought on this. 33,390 crore worth of debt. You've got accrued losses of 50,000 crore rupees. And I just want to, for the benefit of our viewers, want to point out that the average cost of an employee to Air India is 24 lakh rupees, if I'm not wrong. And for Indigo, that number is about 14 to 16 lakh rupees. So which is why my simple point is that the cost of operations is high. There are accumulated losses over the years. Yes, there is operational profit now, but that's very, very small. There's a lot going for Air India. I mean, the MRO, the pilot training centers that they attract zero money and zero interest from private players, they can all be put up for sale. But what the government has now put up for sale is perhaps that nobody is going to buy. You assume a debt of 33,392 crore rupees and you take along a domestic airline, an international airline, Air India Express, 50% stake in EoI SATs. So it's a lot. But Ruchi Bhatia is joining us, and I think she's part of the Aviation Ministry. Lessons learnt as far as Air India is concerned. First, the expression of interest deadline gets pushed over. Now, no interest, Ruchi. Is the government finally coming to terms with the fact that the sale can't go through in the present form? Are they willing to tweak the norms just yet?
Absolutely. In fact, now the story has moved forward from the fact that, up until now, no expression of interest has been received. And now, what is it that the government will do? Remember, the government was already banking that out of the 80,000 crore divestment target that has been met in this year, in FY19, part of it will come in from strategic stake sale. And the biggest reform that they were looking at was the Air India stake sale, and that has completely bombed for the government. They will have to go back to the drawing board, which means what will they do now? Will they look at tweaking the norms? And this is what we're picking up so far, that while the government is disappointed that there is some sort of, an arm twisting that's happening on the corporate front as well, that they have not come in and shown any expression of interest for Air India. It is now, the ball is now in the court of the government. We're given to understand that the group of ministers now will be deciding the future course of action when it comes to how things will pan out from here. And some of those things that you pointed out, the fact that the debt is very high, the consortium norms were very stringent. There was a talk about how these airlines have to come out, whosoever picks up will have to come up with an IPO in the next 3 years. So some of those guidelines were very stringent. And then, of course, there is 33,000 crore debt that we are talking about, which is what the group of ministers will now be looking at. But one thing is very clear. While there are talks about the norms may have to be reworked, we will be expecting a response from the transaction advisors on the reasons as to why is it that there was no bids, no expression of interest.
Ruchi, just hold your thoughts there. Okay. Ruchi, just hold your thoughts there, and Nantara, you stay with us as well, because I've got follow-up questions with both of you. But I'm going to go across to Dheeraj Mathur right now, who's joining us back. And Dheeraj, is now finally official news that you first heard on ET Now. And thanks very much for joining us when we were the only ones putting out that news, that there is no expression of interest that has come in for Air India. So it looks like nobody's interested in buying the national carrier, or at least not in the present form, not with the present norms. What sort of, and I don't want to beat around the bush, so let's talk facts and let's talk candidly. What are the norms that have to go for a private operator to throw his ring into Air India?
Well, there are three big issues. Number one is the issue of flexibility in dealing with the workforce. As the PI and PIM said very clearly that, there's something like over 4,000 employees that are going to be retiring around 2023. And they've also listed their benefits. So that's a huge liability that any private operator would be looking at. So the ability to deal with a very large workforce and their liabilities, their pension liabilities. That's number one. Linked to that is the quantum of debt that is being passed on. Now, you know, whoever buys has to pay for 76% a stake, may possibly have to invest, make some further investments in the organization, and also deal with the pension liabilities. So I think, and while operating in an environment of very high ATF, in an industry where margins are razor thin. So I think the quantum of debt that somebody would be willing to take on is the second thing that the government would definitely have to look at. Third point, which is a point maybe not that significant, would be the continued presence of the government by that 24%. So having said that, these are three big things that obviously come to mind. Now, in terms of the modality of this investment, that is something that the government could also look at, because, and I must say this, while we are making all these statements, we must realize that this is a very complex issue. When if you look at international evidence, no nationalization, also no denationalization.
Just give me a minute, Dheeraj. I'm going to come to you. Dheeraj, I will break this show up into smaller parts because I think we have to keep it conversational. Just hold your thoughts there. I will come to international precedents in just a while, but let me take this across to Nayanthara. Nayanthara, the interest payment takes away 1/5 of Air India's revenues. I mean, what on earth justifies the fact that the government thought it can palm away that debt to any other player? Do you believe at this stage the government will be willing to assume some part of the debt, or has the war against NPA, the current situation that Indian banks are in, put that offer off the table?
And the rising crude oil prices, Supriya, which is, threatening the fisc. The fisc is not as healthy as it looked a couple of months ago when the GOM was meeting and coming out with these terms and conditions. So we must put that in perspective as well. But if it has to meet its disinvestment target, if it has to protect the fisc and wants to keep pump priming the economy, I think the Central Exchequer at that time, Arun Jaitley was at the helm of affairs and in charge of North Block, was very clear that Air India has to be privatized. I think the strong message that the government has today got is that as things stand, nobody is going to bid. So it is whether they're doing it as a strategy or it's not a strategy, that's for viewers to decide. The fact is they've not bid. They've not submitted an expression of interest. The government has no choice but to rework those terms and conditions. If you remember, you interviewed Suresh Prabhu yesterday. I'm sure nothing in his body language indicated that he was going to draw a blank as a civil aviation minister. In the evening, Rituparna Nath, my colleague, was with the civil aviation secretary, who indicated that yes, there's no bid right now, but all of the action is expected in the last 1 hour. I spoke with seniors at the finance ministry today who were expecting certain expressions of interest. I don't think the government was expecting to draw a blank, and now it has no choice but to go back to the drawing board.
Oh, absolutely. Let me just take this across to Kapil Kaul, who's also joining us. And Kapil, I know we had this chat in the afternoon, but I think things changed completely. And people are just not interested in the national carrier, not in its present form, not with these conditions. I was speaking to Dheeraj Mathur about what conditions need to go away. But is Air India such an unattractive buy? Because there are these bilateral routes that Air India has. You have immediate access to domestic and international routes. You have access to some of the best engineering that aviation can boast of. Is Air India such a unattractive buy, or is there an amount of collusion on the part of private industry in this as well, forcing the government to do a review and rethink on the present norms?
Subir, first of all, we are very surprised that an expression of interest is a significant failure, because expression of interest means prima facie that you would look at what the final you would look at this transaction. It's not a commitment. So a failure at an EoI stage is surprising. I was aware that there were 3 to 4 companies that were doing number crunching and looking at the possibilities of taking a decision, but not even submitting an expression of interest. I treat this as a significant failure, and possibly reflects very poorly on the state of Air India. I would think that we could go into the details whether the terms and conditions needed to be more simpler, some of the complexities removed. Government should have possibly given more confidence to prospective investors, as in the questions came to transaction advisor. Given them a confidence, they will handhold the potential investors to close this transaction. But drawing a blank is a surprise. I don't know what are the reasons for people not even bidding in spite of government prodding at the highest level. So one is definitely surprised. Outcome now is for them to go back to the drawing board and see whether they want to make the process simpler, and ensure that some of the irritants in terms of labor, excessive debt, possibly the board seat for the government nominees are removed. But I doubt now in the election year the government would revisit it. So it looks to be that it will be parked for now.
Yeah, that's exactly the question that I want to ask both Ruchi and Nayantara. Just stay with us. And Ruchi, you are at the Aviation Ministry. Is there any word on when will this happen? If there at all is a review, by when can we expect that? And is it possible to go ahead in an election year and do this very close to general elections?
In fact, yeah, that was exactly the point that I was coming to, when you asked me the first question. Now it is going to be very critical. There are only about, several months, about 10 to 11 months left for the NDA government. And will they really bite the bullet? Will they really take it forward? And can they really finish the process in that much time? Because now they will have to go back to the drawing board. We are giving a group of ministers now will be looking to meet and taking a call on what should be the future course of action. But it's $1 million question whether the government really has the gumption to go ahead or not. Will they sweeten the deal? Will they change the norms, the guidelines? Because debt is a huge overhang, and we still don't know what the government intends to do, but they will certainly take the advice of the transaction advisor in this.
Yeah. Right. Okay. Air India was supposed to be the litmus test for this government's reform drive. It's sad that this hasn't been able to get through. There has to be an amount of collusion there. I don't think you can completely blame the government. But those stringent norms left perhaps very little room to maneuver. And I think it sets the government to rethink whether they want to at all retain the stake that they intend to at this stage. I think we'll take a quick breather. We'll talk about that story later this evening as well. I'll hand it over back to Awan. Thank you very much, Kapil Kaul, Dheeraj Mathur, Ruchi Bhatia, and Nayantara Rai for joining us with that big story.